All right. So for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at something a little different.
Okay.
We're going to be exploring a book that's making some waves on Goodreads.
Huh?
It's called I Fell in Love with Hope by Lancali.
Oh,
Now, the average rating is sitting at a pretty decent 3.86 stars.
all right.
But don't let that fool you.
Yeah.
The reviews are,
Polarizing.
completely all over the place.
Interesting.
It seems like you either totally fall head over heels in love with this book, or you just, you can't even finish it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that kind of polarized response usually means that the author is doing something.
Interesting.
Yeah. Pushing some buttons, challenging expectations a little bit.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And believe me, I Fell in Love with Hope definitely pushes some buttons.
Okay.
We are dealing with some heavy stuff here.
Like what?
Terminal illness, grief,
Mhm.
finding hope in the darkest of places.
Yeah.
And just for kicks, the main character, Sam,
Okay.
is the physical embodiment of a hospital.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Yes, you read that right.
A hospital
A hospital as a character,
as a character.
which I think is so interesting. It really makes you think about how setting can impact a story
Totally.
and how perspective can shape our understanding of everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally. And the reviews definitely reflect that.
Like,
People are just like, wait, what is going on?
Yeah.
We've got readers sobbing uncontrollably, others wanting to chuck the book across the room.
wow.
So the big question is, what's really going on beneath the surface of this book?
Way.
And thankfully, we have our expert here to help us dissect all these crazy different reactions.
I'm ready.
Let's see if we can unravel this enigma together.
Let's do it.
Perfect. Now, one of the things that people are talking about the most is the writing style.
Yep.
Some readers are absolutely captivated by Lancali's prose, while others find it a bit much.
Yeah, it's a very unique style.
Yeah.
Very poetic, relies heavily on metaphor. Lancali uses language almost like brushstrokes, painting vivid pictures with words.
Exactly. There are lines in this book that just stop you in your tracks.
Give me an example.
Okay, loneliness is a soft-spoken abuser, singing lullabies. You are alone. You are nothing. You are empty.
Wow.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
You might even say it's almost too beautiful.
Interesting.
Did any of the prose stand out to you that way?
Well, it's interesting you say that because that's the crux of the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can language be too beautiful? Can it overshadow the story itself?
Right.
Some reviewers felt that while Lancali's writing is stunning,
Yeah.
it sometimes distracted from the plot.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as prose that's too ornate, too distracting?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it probably depends on the reader and what they're looking for in a book.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like me love to get lost in the beauty of the language.
Right.
But for others, it might feel like too much. Like trying to have a conversation in a really crowded, noisy room.
That's a good analogy.
Thanks.
And, Lancali's style isn't coming out of nowhere.
Okay.
This kind of lyrical prose has become pretty popular in contemporary fiction. Authors like Madeline Miller and Victoria Schwab also use this richly evocative style to create a specific mood and atmosphere.
So it's like a literary trend then?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
And it's like any trend, it's going to appeal to some people more than others.
Right.
If you're the kind of reader who loves language, who enjoys savoring each sentence and getting swept away by the imagery, then Lancali's work might be right up your alley.
Absolutely. But if you prefer a more straightforward style where the language takes a back seat to the plot, then this might not be the book for you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
Reading is a deeply personal experience.
Totally.
It's all about finding what works for you.
Exactly. And speaking of personal experiences, let's talk about the characters. In I Fell in Love with Hope,
Yes.
even the most critical reviewers seem to agree that the characters were incredibly well drawn and emotionally impactful.
Oh, absolutely. Neo Cursoni. These are characters that stay with you long after you finish the book.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think Sony might be my favorite.
Oh, really?
She's got this incredible spirit.
Yeah.
Even though she's dealing with some pretty tough stuff.
Right.
Did you find yourself connecting with any of the characters in particular?
I think all three of them are remarkably well realized.
Yeah.
And what's really striking is how the author captures their vulnerabilities, their flaws, their hopes. It's that honesty that seems to resonate so deeply with readers.
Yeah.
They feel like they're meeting real people, not just fictional constructs.
And that theme of found family is so strong in this book.
Yeah.
These characters find solace and strength in each other, even when the world feels like it's crumbling around them.
I love that.
Makes you want to reach through the pages and give them all a big hug.
I
know, right?
There's something incredibly powerful about seeing people come together and support each other in the face of adversity.
Right.
It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, connection and love can be a lifeline.
It's almost like a balm for the soul, reading about these characters finding their tribe, their chosen family.
Yeah, I agree.
But of course, this wouldn't be a proper deep dive if we didn't address the elephant in the room.
What's that?
The controversial elements that have sparked so much debate.
Right. We can't shy away from that.
We can't.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that when a book tackles sensitive topics, like mental and physical illness and gender identity, it's bound to elicit a range of responses.
Absolutely. And I Fell in Love with Hope definitely doesn't shy away from those sensitive topics.
So what are people saying?
We've seen reviews from readers who felt that the book romanticized self-destructive behaviors, used illnesses as plot devices, and failed to provide authentic representation of these experiences.
Yeah, I can see how some people might feel that way.
Do any of those criticisms resonate with you?
It's understandable why some readers felt that way. Literature often walks a fine line when dealing with these issues.
Yeah.
And there's always the risk of inadvertently perpetuating harmful stereotypes or minimizing the lived experiences of marginalized communities.
One of the main points of contention seems to be the portrayal of Neo's eating disorder and the abuse he faces from his father.
Right.
Some readers felt that these issues weren't given the weight they deserved and were almost overshadowed by the romantic relationship between Neo and Kerr.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it speaks to a larger conversation about how we represent trauma and recovery in fiction, the delicate balance.
Yeah.
And while the author may have intended to highlight the power of love and connection and healing, it's possible that the execution felt insensitive or dismissive to some readers.
And then there's the issue of Sam's gender identity. While the author initially presents Sam as gender fluid, some readers felt that this aspect wasn't fully developed or authentically represented in the story.
Representing gender identity in a nuanced and respectful way is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And when it comes to representing marginalized identities, authenticity is key.
Right.
Did you feel like the book handled this aspect well?
Honestly, I'm a little torn on this one. On the one hand, I appreciate the author's attempt to explore gender fluidity, but on the other hand, I can see why some readers felt like it wasn't fully explored or that it felt a bit like a plot device rather than an integral part of Sam's character.
That's a thoughtful observation.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of considering the author's intent versus the impact on the reader. Even with the best of intentions, sometimes the execution can miss the mark.
And I think that's something we need to keep in mind as we delve deeper into this book. There are multiple perspectives to consider.
For sure.
And what might feel problematic to one reader could resonate deeply with another. It's all part of the beauty and complexity of literature.
Exactly. And that complexity is precisely what makes this book so fascinating to analyze.
Well said. And speaking of complex, let's talk about the romantic relationship between Sam, the immortal hospital, and Hikari, a human girl. This is where the immortal ex-mortal trope really comes into play.
Interesting.
Did this aspect of the book raise any red flags for you?
It definitely raises some interesting questions about power dynamics and consent. When you have one character who is literally immortal and another who is mortal, there's an inherent imbalance of power. And that can be tricky territory to navigate, especially in a romantic relationship.
Especially when you consider that Sam has been around for who knows how long. And even had a previous relationship with a boy they watched grow up from childhood.
Whoa.
That definitely adds another layer of complexity, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder how much agency Hikari truly has in this relationship. Is she really making a free and informed choice? Or is she being influenced by Sam's immortality and their unique position of power?
Those are some heavy questions.
Yeah.
And I think they're at the heart of why this particular aspect of the book has generated so much discussion. It challenges us to think about the ethics of these kinds of relationships.
For sure.
And to consider how power imbalances can play out in unexpected ways.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Thanks.
This isn't just a fluffy romance. It's a story that forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about love, power, and the boundaries between the immortal and the mortal.
And I think that's what makes this book so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not afraid to ask tough questions and push us outside of our comfort zones.
I agree.
But we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
Maybe it's time to take a breath and shift gears a bit.
Okay.
What do you say we dive into the emotional core of this book?
Let's do it. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We've been focusing a lot on the more controversial aspects of I Fell in Love with Hope.
Right.
But, it's important to remember that this book also deals with some universal themes that I think resonate with readers on a very deep level.
Exactly. We've talked about the heavy stuff like illness and grief and the ethics of that whole immortal romance thing.
Right.
But I'm curious, did you get a sense of hope from this book?
Oh, absolutely.
Because even the title suggests that hope plays a major role here.
Yeah, and it's not a superficial kind of hope.
Right.
It's a hard-won hope that emerges from the characters' struggles.
Okay.
They've faced incredible pain and loss, yet they still find a way to hold on to that spark of something better, something worth fighting for.
It's like the hope itself is a character in the story.
Yeah.
It's fragile, it's tested, but it ultimately endures.
Right.
And a lot of the reviewers seem to have picked up on that. They talk about feeling moved, inspired, even comforted by the way the book portrays hope in the face of adversity.
There's one review that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It said, "This book ripped my heart out, stomped on it, and then somehow managed to put it back together stronger than before."
Wow.
I think that perfectly captures the emotional roller coaster that readers experience with this book.
That's quite an image.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how this book handles grief. It's not shying away from the raw, messy reality of it all.
Right.
Did you find that portrayal to be effective?
I did. I think the author does a remarkable job of capturing the different stages of grief.
Okay.
The anger, the denial, the bargaining, the depression, and eventually, hopefully, the acceptance. It's not a linear process.
Yeah.
And the book reflects that. The characters stumble, they fall back, they question everything.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they find a way to keep moving forward.
And that's what makes it so relatable, right?
Totally.
Grief isn't something you just get over. It's a journey, and everyone's journey is different.
Right.
But seeing these characters navigate their own grief journeys can be incredibly validating for readers who are going through something similar.
I agree. And it's not just about the characters' individual grief journeys.
Okay.
It's also about the collective grief they experience as a community.
Right.
They're all dealing with loss in different ways, but they come together to support each other, to create a space where it's okay to be vulnerable, to be messy, to not have all the answers.
It goes back to that theme of found family we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
They find strength in their shared experiences, in their shared pain.
Exactly.
And that's something that I think a lot of readers find incredibly powerful.
It's that shared humanity that makes this book so impactful.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't personally experienced the specific events depicted in the book,
right,
you can still connect with the emotions, the vulnerabilities, the search for meaning and connection.
And that brings us back to the ending, which we teased a bit earlier now without giving anything away for those who haven't read it yet.
Right.
It's safe to say that the ending of I Fell in Love with Hope has left some readers scratching their heads.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
Some people loved it.
Mm-hmm.
They felt like it tied everything together beautifully and provided a sense of closure.
Okay.
Others felt completely betrayed by the author's choices.
Right.
They felt like the ending was abrupt, confusing, even cruel.
I know. It's like the ending itself is a Rorschach test.
Yeah.
You see in it what you want to see or maybe what you're afraid to see.
Interesting.
It definitely sparked a lot of debate among the reviewers.
I bet.
Did the ending work for you or did it leave you feeling unsatisfied?
Honestly, I'm still wrestling with it.
Okay.
There's a part of me that wants a neat and tidy resolution, but I also appreciate the author's willingness to challenge conventional storytelling and leave things a bit open-ended.
That's fair. It's definitely not a simple happily ever after ending. And I think that's what makes it so interesting to dissect.
Yeah.
It forces you to confront your own expectations about how a story should end.
Totally.
And to grapple with the messy realities of life, love, and loss.
And that's what makes it such a great topic for a deep dive, wouldn't you say?
I think so.
This book is a conversation starter. It's a book that makes you think, that makes you feel, that stays with you long after you've turned the final page.
Absolutely. And that's something we always aim for with these depth dives.
Yeah.
To spark a conversation, to encourage you to engage with the material on a deeper level. So welcome back to our deep dive into I Fell in Love with Hope.
Yeah.
We've explored the beautiful and sometimes overwhelming prose.
Right.
We debated those controversial elements. And we even grappled with that ambiguous ending.
Yeah, we really dug into the heart of this book.
We did.
And I have to say, I'm impressed by the sheer range of reactions it's provoked.
It's been fascinating to see how this book has resonated with people in such different ways.
Yep.
Some readers have connected with it on a deeply personal level, seeing their own experiences reflected in the characters' struggle.
Right. And others have been challenged, even angered by the book's choices.
Yeah.
But even those negative reactions, I think, speak to the power of the story.
Exactly. It's a testament to the author's willingness to take risks and push boundaries.
For sure.
I Fell in Love with Hope isn't afraid to ask those tough questions, explore those uncomfortable truths,
right,
and leave the reader wrestling with some complex emotions.
And that's something we should celebrate, don't you think?
I do.
In a world of quick reads and easy answers, this book demands our attention.
Yeah.
Our engagement, our emotional investment.
I completely agree. It's a book that stays with you long after you've turned that final page.
Right.
And isn't that what we're all looking for?
Yeah.
Art that moves us, challenges us, makes us see the world in a new light.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's not about agreeing with every choice the author made or loving every aspect of the story.
Right.
It's about the impact it has on you.
Yeah.
The conversations. It sparks the questions it raises.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love to hear your final thoughts.
Okay.
What's the one thing you want listeners to take away from our exploration of I Fell in Love with Hope?
That's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway for me is the power of empathy.
Okay.
This book challenges us to step outside of our own experiences and see the world through the eyes of characters who are dealing with loss, illness, identity struggles,
right,
and the complexities of love in all its forms.
Beautifully said. And I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
I Fell in Love with Hope may not be a perfect book, but it's a book that matters.
Right.
It's a book that invites us to embrace the messy, complicated beauty of the human experience.
Totally.
And ultimately, isn't that what great art is all about?
I think so.
So if you're looking for a book that will challenge you, move you, and stay with you long after you've finished reading it, I highly recommend checking out I Fell in Love with Hope. You might love it, you might hate it,
right,
but I guarantee it will make you think.
For sure.
And that's something we can all appreciate until next time. Happy reading.